my sexuality. I've tried to like be all-encompassing. I feel like I've accomplished a lot more as a performer and a spokesperson for everyone who's sort of on the margins. And I think my main focus has always been to reach out to people who might be hesitant, who are afraid, who don't necessarily have the ability to express themselves. And that of course, refers to a lot of straight people. And I think the beauty of what I've done over the years is to uplift the gay community, and have people have a deeper understanding of how fabulous and brilliant and insightful and original and creative the gay community is, way before, it was being celebrated. Back in the 70s and the 80s, when I started performing, I, embraced my influences, people like Bette Midler and Lily Tomlin, and all the sort of glamorous, fabulous actresses of that time. And I embodied that. I imbued my work with that, so that there was a sophistication and a sort of self-confidence that women had never had before in comedy, for sure. And in general, as a person of varying stripes of sexuality, I just thought it was interesting to come at it from all these different angles. But the most important thing to me was that it be highly sophisticated and intelligent and non-pandering. I mean, I've never pandered to my gay audience. I don't believe in it. I think it's cheap. And I think that my work speaks across the board to everybody. I transcend sexuality, which to me is the most important statement you can make about having any sexuality at all.
It's an absolute bullseye point for me. I followed your career for a long, long time, and the number one thing that I've recognized in terms of how you've represented is it's been fearless in your style. I'm curious to those that are watching you, both queer women in our community, but the LGBTQ community broadly. How do you find the courage to do what you've done?
I think it's just inherent. I mean, I don't really think about it. It's second nature to me. I grew up with confidence. I grew up, in a very liberal Jewish household. I have 3 older brothers. My mom was an abstract artist. There's her fabulous painting behind me, Blue Dome Cyst, which I do a whole piece about in my show. On the other side, there's a reflection, so it's harder to see it, is my daughter's painting that she made for me for my 60th birthday. And so I'm bookended by my mother and my daughter, who my mother was a great artist, my daughter is a great artist. So these things inform my work, the broad, huge scope of what is beautiful in the world: art, music, theater, great film, fascinating television, literature. I was just raised on all of these things that were my support and where I stood. It was my stage of where I jumped off from, my jumping off point as a performer and a woman and a person. So I've never had any problem with that kind of confidence. Of course, as a person, we all have moments of doubt about ourselves. I think that's human, and I think that's important. And I think it also makes you humble, and it makes you self-realized. And I think if you don't look at yourself in a holistic way, you cease to evolve. You become stymied and stagnant. And I think you constantly have to look at yourself and go, how can I evolve from here? How can I grow? How can I become more accepting, more understanding, more compassionate? And I think that has always been the foundation of my evolution as a human being and as a performer and an artist.
I'm curious, you give me the opportunity to transition there in terms of the identity of you being a woman. I've read lots that you identify as bisexual versus lesbian. For our audience, explain your identification as a bisexual versus a lesbian. Why is that important to you?
It's not important to me, honestly. No, I could just say nothing. I don't care. I am. I mean, I've been attracted to men. When I was younger, I dated men. I've been in a relationship with my fabulous girlfriend. I mean, we should be married, but we're not technically married. But we've been together for almost 24 years. She didn't help raise my child. She's my daughter's other mother. She's a brilliant writer, a brilliant, funny, fabulous, strong woman. So that's who I'm with. That's who I love. And that's the person I intend to spend the rest of my life with. Inshallah. Um, but I find men attractive. I don't know. I think they're fascinating. I think they're sexy. I think they're weird. I think they're obnoxious. I think a lot of things about a lot of people. But when a man is really cool, I find them attractive.
Yeah.
But I'm with my wife, my partner, my lover, and that's who I'm with. So, but that doesn't like cut off her feelings about, different people. I think you continue to be attracted to all kinds of people throughout your life, even if you're in a committed relationship. So to me, it's more like, am I capable of loving? Am I capable of loving myself enough to love somebody else and be present in a relationship? Those are more the definitions of who I am than, anything under the rainbow of sexuality.
I'm curious along that vein. We constantly propel queer women in our community. We seem to be so masculine, gay, man dominated inside our LGBTQ community and focusing on issues in LGBT. One of the examples of that is we're down to 26 lesbian bars in all of America. How do you think the status of for queer women it is in America? Do you think we're doing a good enough job? The lesbian and queer women's community is being represented as strongly as it should be? Any thoughts about what you think about what's going on for women?
Well, I think like the entire queer community, it's a individual sort of process. Are you in a relationship? Are you honest with your family? Can you negotiate the world as a queer person? Those are the bigger questions. And if you need the community for support, I think that's wonderful. But are you able to maneuver through life with happiness with your sexuality? And I think that's a more important question.
Okay. I want to talk about some of memorable achievements of your career. You're one of those that represent the LGBTQ community in a kind of rarefied fashion. First, I want to talk about being a comedian. You started stand-up in the 70s. To our viewers that might not know, Sandra Bernhard is recognized by Comedy Central as one of the top 100 greatest stand-ups of all times. One of my favorite loves was David Letterman, and I remember you vividly with David Letterman. In fact, in preparing for you today, I went back and looked up, and you were on David Letterman 28 appearances, which is just breathtaking. 30. Oh, was it 30? Oh, I see, and I read 20.
30 to be exact.
I'm curious, as great of the recognition for you, I'm curious about who you admire. If you were going to pick one comedian of all time, who would it be?
Well, I'd have to say Lily Tomlin was one of my biggest influences at the just perfect moment, because she was breaking through in a way that nobody had really done before. She was, morphing characters and, really, really cutting edge material in a way that no one had done. And she was so confident and such a great actress and so multi-talented. And she was just a huge influence on me. So if I had to choose one person, it would be Lily Tomlin. But then, of course, like I said, there's Bette Midler. And then conversely, there's people like Tina Turner, who was a huge influence on me. I mean, she's indescribable. To me, having just lost Tina Turner was a kind of a real opening for me to look at the depth and breadth of being a Black woman in our culture who, you know, sustained abuse and ridicule and you know, the whole racist time in our community, our culture, which has never really ended, but she transcended it and became the first Black woman of rock and roll, and that was unheard of. And just her sheer force of energy and will was such a big influence on me. So I'd say those three women, like, sort of in a strange way, formed who I am as a complete entertainer and performer. And then so many others, but we don't have all day to, like, you know. But I think they're the triumvirate of people that really spoke to me.
In the 1990s, for me, and watching television and trying to find identification for LGBT, it was a rare moment. You come in the early 90s as Nancy Bartlett Thomas on ABC's Roseanne. You became the first person, bisexual identity character, to play such a role. Tell me about what your experience was this time now that you've had away from that. What was the experience like to be on Roseanne?
Well, I mean, of course, at the time, she was so cutting edge and so willing to really transcend anything that had been done on network television before. So her recent sort of transition into this, I'm so sorry, that's my dog, and he's got to go crazy, so you're going to have to forgive me, everybody, but he's a very vocal person.
Right.
He is a person. Hold on one quick second. I got to get him something. George, do this. Okay. Yeah. And it's one thing to have a spoiled child, but when you have a spoiled dog, it's a whole other thing. So I have to feed him little snacks to keep him quiet.
We have a giant dog-loving audience, so they're going to love this movie.
But yeah, anyway, I'm terribly disappointed in what Roseanne has become. I mean, I don't know why she would squander all of the incredible goodwill and brilliance that she, you know, precipitated in our culture. I don't know. I don't get it. I don't know why she would do it. And I'm not really in touch with her anymore. So I don't know what the answer is, but it's terribly sad and disappointing. And it sullies the experience because, you know, if I can say one thing about myself, I've been the kind of person who stayed on track my whole life and career. What I believed as a kid, I still believe now. And I can never imagine turning my back on my community, on the Black community, on you know, just all the people who make this culture so rich and beautiful. I don't understand it, and it's, you know, it's very disappointing.
Would you be able to forgive the actions and the words and restart a relationship with Roseanne?
Well, I don't think at this point or this juncture I could be friends with her, because I think she's still in that state of mind. I think she's in this very MAGA state of mind, and I don't really. I mean, it's not like I'm holding grudges or don't forgive her. I can't be associated with people like that. I don't have time for it. And a lot of people might come through the other side, but I don't see that happening with her. So yeah. It's really hard to say, yeah, great, you know, come on back into the fold now that you've, you know, finally figured it all out. I don't think she has.
Yeah. You know, another moment that I really loved, it's near and dear to LGBTQ community here in South Florida, and that's, of course, the ballroom scene from Pose. You played Nurse Judy. What was the most moving part of your playing Nurse Judy? Was the ballroom scene, yes, and community storyline, but what was going on in terms of AIDS at the time? And the reflection, your character is a representation to me that I have heard so many times, and of course I remember living through the peak and height of AIDS, that nurses and especially queer women were who took care of gay men. That was the
Correct.
representation of your character. I even in talking about it, I start to get emotional over what I went through and what I watched. And tell me about your experience of how the backdrop of, yes, the greatness of the show and the storylines of our community with Ryan Murphy, but especially with the AIDS backdrop. What was that like to you lived through it in the 90s, but then to go through it all again in the storylines of Nurse Judy on Pose?
Well, what was most important in my perception of the show was that all the people back then who never would have had a voice or had been embraced or accepted were now stars of a show about a time when that was not a possibility. And that to me was a beautiful reflection of how far we've come as a culture. And that's very important. And to play a character that had a lot of depth and a lot of strength, that also reflected the women of that time who were willing to go into the trenches to take care of predominantly, gay men who were dying of AIDS. It was also a very, very intense experience, having lost a lot of friends in the 80s and the 90s. So it all came together and it made sense to me, and there was a lot to draw on. And I also became, very close with all the trans actors, especially MJ Rodriguez, who I'm still friends with, and I'm so happy for her and her success. And, it was also an interesting thing to be able to stand back and observe all of these actresses, these trans women, going through what they were going through, which was, it's a big deal. They were thrust into the spotlight in the show, and I think that was a big evolution for them, as it would be for anybody.
When you got to play the role and relive the AIDS crisis in a very unique and different way in playing in Pose, did you ever consider, I wonder why women are not, and especially nurses, are not remembered more in the height of the AIDS crisis as being such a vital story to gay men and the AIDS crisis? Is it something that you thought, we really do need to revisit this because women didn't get their due in terms of recognizing how important they were in that time?
But I think now they are. I think shows like Pose and many documentaries and reflections on that time, I think people finally are acknowledging and giving it up to the women of that time, to the queer women, to the nurses, to the people who risked their lives and put their own lives on hold for that whole movement and time. So I think that's being resolved, and I'm really happy to say that's
good.
Around.
Another thing that is very very near and dear for me is Ryan Murphy's American Horror Story. I've watched every second of the entire series. You're Fran in the latest American Horror Story NYC. It was interesting as I watched the response to American Horror Story this time, different than Coven and Hotel, in that it was a storyline that has this parallel to, really, as we're in June, Pride Month, to police and brutality and the New York scene going on of this intersection of what was going on in New York in this time period. If you were a gay man, you loved NYC. Then a lot of people that were not in our community didn't find NYC as satisfying as others. Oh, you play Fran. What did you think about American Horror Story NYC and your participation in it?
Well, I thought it was a nice kind of bridge between Pose and this story. I mean, obviously it's a whole different approach to that time. But again, having been around it and familiar with it, it was fun. It was fun, obviously, and sort of, strange and well, the show is supposed to be scary, so scary. But I thought it was important, and I thought a lot of people really responded to it. And again, once again, I think that people who watch American Horror Story and like it for different reasons had a new sort of insight into that time. And I think that people really kind of liked it, and it was like, oh, I didn't know that happened then. It was like, these are all like based on historical elements, and I think that's why Ryan Murphy's shows are so interesting and successful.
Yeah. I want to ask you about, you've just had a birthday, and you were an opportunity for me to ask on a principal subject that we talk about a lot at Happening Out Television Network, and that is ageism in LGBT. You've just had a birthday. How are you on the subject of age? Is it something, I heard you mention the number of 60, but is ageism something that you face? Is it something that you don't like to talk about age? You know, in LGBT, we can be very ageist. Where do you
And every other aspect of our culture too. But I've been, you know, again, I feel lucky. I mean, I take incredible care of myself, and I really have never stopped working out and living the way I live, which is like basically like, you know, a nun. I mean, besides sex. I mean, I've never smoked. I don't drink. I've never done drugs, and I have, you know, excellent DNA, and I'm lucky. I'm lucky that I'm in, you know, great shape, and I take it really seriously. So I feel like internally, I don't feel the age I am, but of course, you know, I mean, when you've been at what I'm doing for so many years, there's moments when you go, ugh, I really want to keep doing this, but of course I do. I love it. Right. And I want to do it. So I don't really spend much time thinking about the age thing. And if it is getting in the way of anything in terms of my work or getting parts, well, maybe it will. I don't know. But that's the process of life. And I get it on many levels, and I just keep forging ahead. And I think that's all one can do. And of course, a lot of people are not so lucky. A lot of people, you know, are content with illness and age in a different way. So it's hard for me to weigh in completely on that. And I hope I can continue to say that it's hard for me to weigh in, because I like where I'm at.
Okay. Well, that's good. That's very positive. Another issue that we weigh in on frequently, LGBT, especially gay men, is body positivity. And frankly, something really, in preparing for you, did shock me. I was not aware of it because I wasn't looking at this magazine when it came out. But in September of 1992, and a lot of our viewers are probably going to be shocked about this, you did a nude pictorial for Playboy and was on the cover. What possessed you to want to do that in 1992?
I thought it was subversive. I thought it was like to be who I am, not the girl next door, not the, you know, the typical like exploited blonde, and, you know, somebody who was like, you know, this was my stock and trade, to be like sexy and sexualizing myself. I thought it was just fun and crazy, and they also let me write the accompanying, you know, article, which I was very tongue in cheek. And there you go. Not just another pretty face.
That's it.
And I thought it was important. I thought it was important to be a woman who was not always like celebrated for being beautiful. In a venue that's all there is beauty, superficial beauty that's created and molded. And I'm just myself, and I've never done anything to myself. So how cool. Like I celebrated myself.
And if we remember too, that was 30 years ago, 31 years ago that you did that. Martha Stewart recently, you're not Martha Stewart's age, by the way, but Martha Stewart recently
God bless her. Let's all keep going and getting to Martha Stewart.
God bless her.
Yay.
She is Sports Illustrated's cover model for the swimsuit edition. If you got asked today, Playboy digitally or Sports Illustrated, would you do it? Would you do nudity today?
Well, she didn't do nudity. She's wearing bathing suit. I wouldn't. I wouldn't. That was it. I mean,
You don't
you
need
want
to
to
protest
you want
today.
to expose yourself at the peak of perfection. I still look good, but no, I wouldn't. There'd be no reason to do it now. Then it would just be, it'd be kind of weird. But
Yeah.
it was fun then, and it was the perfect time, and in perfect time in our culture, perfect time for me to make that statement. So that's done and dusted. On to the
Done.
next,
On to the next.
subversive
Okay, got
moment.
it. And as it relates to you, I want to zero in on. I really, honestly think one of the things that LGBT America has loved Sandra Bernhard right from the very beginning, and that is telling it like it is. You've already said that. You appeared in Comedy Central's Politically Incorrect, and one of the things that I looked at that I thought was super interesting, Entertainment Weekly did a story about you in 1995, and they talked about you being a guest on the panelist of Comedy Central's talk show Politically Incorrect, and an exchange that you had, an argument really, with fellow panelist, conservative political commentator John Lofton. And you stood up and spat in his direction, according to Entertainment Weekly, and exclaimed, quote, "If I had you, you'd be an abortion." First off, is that true? Did you say that?
I mean, I don't remember exactly what I said, but yes, I don't think I said that. But maybe I did. Who knows? But I would say it now. And he was, one of those evangelical types, and he was like basically telling me, like, being, how dare I talk this way as a woman? And I was like, how dare you talk to me as a fascist, you fucker? Excuse me, I'm not. Maybe I'm
Oh,
not supposed to say
no,
those
we can
words
say
here,
that
but
word here.
you can bleep me out. But I was incensed and furious, and I've never lost that sense of fury. And here we are being co-opted, 28 years later by the same people who are tearing at our foundation as of humanity, tearing women's, reproductive rights apart, crushing trans people. All the great strides that we've made culturally have been yanked back by these evangelical Christians and religious zealots, and by the Supreme Court, who, of course, have been appointed by these people, manipulated by people like Donald Trump and his cohorts. And so I say, of course, let's stay with Joe Biden. Let's stay the course. He's done so much for us, the LGBTQ plus community, for the Black community, for women, and we need to flip the House and shore up the Senate, and really in the next election cycle, really take it to another level and continue to appoint liberal judges across the country to counteract the horrible, woeful right-wing, elements that have started to create havoc for us. So I'm going to have to wrap it up. But on this note, I would like to say that more than ever, we must be engaged. We must stay strong, focused, and not afraid. I mean, we have to throw fear out the window. We have to do exactly what we have to do. We can't change course right now. We've got to stay with Joe Biden. I have total faith in him. And this is not the time to try to I wish we could have, I love Pete Buttigieg. This isn't going to happen right now. We got to wait. We got to stay the course, and we got to roll up our sleeves and get in the trenches again.
Yeah, get in the trenches again. Good words, Sandra. You can tell why for a long time Sandra Bernhard has been one of our icon warriors in the LGBTQ community. We invite you to go to sandrabernhard.com. There is so much information there, so much history, so many interesting and beautiful pictures and video to see.
Thank you.
There.
I just want to say one more thing before I jump off.
Sure.
I know a lot of people call me a legend, call me an icon, which I'm very flattered by, and of course I appreciate it. But I want people to know that I am very relevant. I am very of this time. I don't ride on my laurels or rest on the work of the past. I believe in constantly, writing and creating and being a fresh voice now. And that's very important to me. I don't consider myself somebody whose best work is behind them. My best work is every day when I get up, and when I go on stage, I give it the same thought and consideration. I just so happen to have a lot more wisdom and insight and overview than I did 20, 30 years ago, or certainly when I started out. But I am in no way, shape, or form, like resting on my past, successes. So please come see me wherever I am. Go to my, website, come to my shows, support me now, because I support you always. And thank you for a fabulous interview. I really enjoyed talking to you. It was really, really great. And I look forward to talking to you again.
Sandra Bernhard, thank you very much for joining us at Unapologetically Queer.
Thank you, darling.